Oh, guys, good, you hear? I am so excited. Guess what? I hope this isn't about your podcast again. Why, did you finally listen to it?
Da-da-da-da, 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 the Gloomy Next Door production.
Before we start this week's podcast, I wanted to take a moment to address the situation that happened in Florida this week. As a parent, every day that I drop my daughter off at school, I always worry for her safety. As she gets older, I always am concerned more and more. Wherever she goes, if she goes anywhere with friends and we're not around, I'm always afraid about her safety until the moment she does return. But the safest place that we can ever bring our children is school. And when there is a tragedy, such as the school shooting in Florida, a lot of us parents reflect. We all have that same panic, that same emotion, that same feeling inside that makes us fearful the next day when we drop our child off. I, just like a lot of you, had that exact same emotion. My heart, my prayers, they all go out to the victims and the families who unfortunately had to suffer such a tragedy this week. For that, I'd like to take a moment of silence for all the victims involved. And now we will go about our normal podcast, but deeply, deeply saddened by this tragedy. And hopefully we can learn a little bit more about what to avoid and what to look for in the future to try and prevent these tragedies from happening.
The 1970s and 80s had Elbow, Gravy Train, Purina, Meow Mix, and Bell Bottoms. You've changed your clothes, now change how you feed your pet. Like Bell Bottoms, kick the kibble and join us in the 21st century with the healthiest diet for dogs and cats. Feed naturally, feed raw, feed fishing foods.
The Groomer Next Door podcast.
Dun, 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 dun. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm everybody's friend.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to an international episode of the Groomer Next Door podcast. I'm your host, Chris Green, and joining us in just a mere moments is Mikhail. He is the CEO of Vecado. I will not even spoil how the name Vecado came out. I think that was really cool, and I couldn't believe I didn't figure it out. It was something that just went whoop over my head. Well, this is going to be episode 2 of our series of plant-based diet. And I'm going to be honest, I'm enjoying this experience a lot. Learning all about the other side with plant-based has been a journey in itself. But to understand it best, it's been a lot of fun to be able to talk to the great people that have been on the podcast and get their perspective. Well, let's go into the fact of the week. And I thought, you know what, we're going to stay with facts that have to do with vegans, because vast majority of plant-based diet feeders are going to be vegan. So I thought, you know what, just tie it all in together so that we can kind of get a little bit more ideas about their belief. The term vegan for someone refraining from eating or using animal products was coined in 1994 by Vegan Society founder Donald Watson. Now, I thought that was extremely interesting because I would have thought that it would have been a term used a lot earlier in time, I guess. Thought mid-90s, not really what I would have expected, so I thought that was quite interesting. Well, by that sound, we are about to land in Toronto and join Mikhail. So with that said, welcome Mikhail to the podcast.
Attention, passengers. We are now landing in Toronto, Canada, and the time is currently on your watch. Thank you for traveling with us.
All right, coming to us from Toronto, Canada, home of the Maple Leafs, which, of course, as I mentioned to you, I love hockey. We are joined by Mikhail from Vecado, and he just gave me the aha moment, which I feel so dumb. I'm so sorry. I did not pick up how the breakdown was on the name of Vecado, so I'm going to let you start off by telling us all about that, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Vecado is a pretty unique name. It's 3 syllables, and what it stands for is vegan, CA cat, and DO dog. So it's vegan cats and dogs, and it essentially represents what our company is all about. We offer vegan cat and dog food, so it kind of sounds like avocado, but Vecado. And another cool thing about it is if you translate it to French, it sounds almost like cadeau, and cadeau in French means a gift. And in Canada, we are bilingual. We have English and French, so it gives an extra ring to it in the province of Quebec. So that's kind of what the name means.
You know, back to the hockey thing, Quebec City needs a team. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I know I didn't mention that just a second ago, but it does need a team. I'm one of those people. Yeah. Now I'm gonna take a wild guess here. You're more of a Montreal Canadiens fan than anything else. Am I off base a little bit, or are you actually a Leaf fan?
I'm actually a Leaf fan.
Really?
I am. I've been a Leaf fan for a long time.
I was waiting for you to know, I do like the Montreal Canadiens. I don't know. It's all the years of knowing all of my Canadian friends and even playing, I always saw that they would lean more towards the French side than anything else. So, cool. And you got a great team. So I'm very envious. And another place I definitely have to make it to. So, well, let's start off with the origin story. And yours and your company, they, of course, align. And so please tell us all about that, because it's a great story.
Yeah. So the way I started the company was somewhat by accident. In school, I learned about sustainable businesses, and it was always my dream to contribute to the better world, to invent cool technologies that would produce clean energy. And one day I happened to be at a meditation session and started a conversation with a guy, and we spoke about different things. And he said, "Well, I'm a vegan and I have a cat, and it's extremely difficult to find vegan cat food in our city." And I thought, well, that's an interesting concept, vegan cat food. Never thought about that, but it really did catch my attention. And I said, yeah, I'll look into this. And a few months later, after doing a lot of research on suitability, on availability, and et cetera, I started a company that distributes vegan cat and dog food. And at the time, I didn't realize that vegan products, vegan cat and dog food, they very strongly contribute to the world and to making it a more sustainable place. So the company I started that was kind of almost accidental, but it does link to my earnings to make the world a more sustainable place.
And there's always the best ideas come from just all of a sudden, just poof, and they fall into your lap. And that's kind of what's always interested me about these stories is how quickly they come out, or even just that aha moment. Now, I was talking to you about soapbox moments and what really gets you to have that public conversation with somebody just out of random. And so it always interests me to hear people's moments. What gets that whole thing ignited? So please let us know what your soapbox moment is.
Well, what really ignites me and wants me to share with ideas is when I attend various trade shows, and I visit quite a few of them during the year. There are lots of them in the summer, and I see thousands upon thousands of people. We have interesting conversations, and the immediate reaction when people realize that we sell vegan cat and dog food is concerned. That's strange. I thought cats were obligate carnivores or dogs are omnivores. How do you manage that? And immediately in my head, I realized that a lot of people associate veganism, especially if people are not vegan or vegetarians themselves, with a salad mix. So how can you feed a salad to a cat or a dog and have them healthy? It doesn't make sense. And in a way, that's a very valid concern. If you feed your cat with tomatoes and cucumbers and cabbage, they're not going to do very well. They're actually going to get sick. Their heart is going to go, eyesight is going to diminish, and they're going to have all kinds of trouble. But the thing is, vegan does not mean just a salad mix. It's actually a very sophisticated formulation that we use for all of our formulas, and they're highly scientific. A lot of nutritional science went into developing the formulations that we have for cats and for dogs. All of them are compliant with, actually go beyond the requirements of AFCO or the European standard, which is higher than American. And it's not just the salad mix. So, for example, for protein, we have like 30% protein coming from sunflower seeds, coming from peas, and many other ingredients. And it's supplemented with minerals and vitamins that dogs and cats need. So it's very, very different from a salad mix. And when people sort of start seeing it, oh, okay. I mean, if it's more than cabbage and tomatoes, then maybe my cat or dog will actually do well. And we've seen many stories when people switch their cats and dogs, and they're doing fantastic. A lot of the issues or the problems that they had with their health, for example, itchiness or bad breath, they go away relatively quickly. And just having that conversation with people, like face to face, those trade shows is really like ignites me and sort of helps me, helps me help them realize that there's another option out there to feed cats and dogs.
Well, for so many decades, there was only one particular option, and that was to go with big pet food. And there was no other way around it. They controlled the market. They controlled everything about it. And we didn't really know anything. And then more science, more knowledge was being revealed, and we learned more. And even now, and I know you see it as well, it's still not fully aware that most dog and cat food is harmful. So there has to be an alternative. But people just don't realize that there is such a thing. And that's what I found really interesting about the plant-based diet, is there is an option. And without coming in and saying, oh, well, there's this that can be done and that can be done differently, I felt that we really had an opportunity to have these conversations. And what's cool is be able to have it with you, who sees things from a broad spectrum. You get to see it from, being in another country and seeing what's going on here, which they're literally, I really always say Canada and US are really one country divided by a little line. But their views are slightly different. But your problems are the same. You have the slaughterhouse problems. You have the commercial farms. You have a lot of issues that we have, and you have the same bad dog and cat food. So it makes sense to come up with an alternative. So for that, I commend you. Now, one of the questions I always had with this is going plant-based. Is it a belief, or is it because of health? And that's always been the start off for me. Is it a belief? Because it's like, again, vegan, I'm vegetarian, and I still, and we talked about it, I still feed my dogs meat, I still feed my cats meat, but I can't do it myself. It's just not, because I can't stand commercial farms, I'm afraid. But do you find that the people you talk to are doing plant-based diet because it's part of their belief, or is it because of something to do with their dog or cat's health?
Actually, there are both groups. And actually, reasons, they vary. So there's a very prominent group of vegans who are very, very, including myself, who are very much concerned for the well-being of farm animals. And it's not fair to treat them that way. It's not fair to treat, for example, pigs differently from dogs or cats. So why do we kill one and eat the other? It doesn't make any sense. And the suffering that the animals are going through, it's just, it's bad. It's really bad. And with the increased production, with increased volume, and just desire to make more money, the situation gets worse and worse and worse. With a growing population, conditions are getting worse. So a lot of people, even though they're concerned for the well-being of their pets, they're still choosing to go vegan. And then shortly after the switch, they realize, no, it's actually working fine, and everything was just sort of bad press on the internet, all the concerns and stuff, all the blasphemy and stuff. But they do have concerns for the well-being when they switch, and later it works out fine. And there's definitely another group of people who are switching for health. Some dogs and cats simply cannot have meat-based proteins. They're allergic to them. Either allergic, or they have sensitivities, or their vet prescribed them a plant-based diet. They simply cannot have meat-based proteins. So that even though people, their parents, their guardians, they may even not have considered a vegan diet, but it's a necessity for their cats and dogs to be switched. So reasons vary, and these are just one of the two main groups of people and two main reasons why people go plant-based for their pets.
And I can, again, I can completely concur with the whole logic of the internet is just swarming with opinions. And that's the hard part about this, is that how do you decipher it? And that's where starting this process, it was a lot of work to just try to wrap my brain around it all. And I'm sure that a lot of pet parents have that same issue. It doesn't matter where you're from, whether you live in America, you live in Canada, you live in Austria, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. These problems exist. It is a worldwide problem. And I've noticed the same thing with Mercy for Animals. They've done a lot of different things with U.S. commercial farms. They've done it up in Canada as well. Commercial farms just are horrendous. They've taken the place of small farms, which were decent, and they've treated animals terribly. So it's definitely difficult. What are some of the issues in Canada that you see? Yeah, and especially I'm pretty sure you see it even more because of being in the business you're in, that you see coming out of commercial farms.
I wouldn't say they're much different from the U.S. I mean, we have a different regulator, but the issues are much the same. Like, I was actually trying to look at the situation from the eyes of the manufacturers. Like, what are they going through? I mean, I know like what ourselves, vegans and activists, are saying about the slaughterhouses and how can they do this to animals? But then there's huge players out there, like with the multi-billion-dollar businesses. Like, what are they thinking? Like, what's going through their mind, mm-hmm. right? And it's from their perspective, I think they're actually horrified of contamination. There were a couple of outbreaks that brought production levels down, and they still haven't recovered in terms of volume. And on every step of producing something, on every step of producing new products, we have measures in place to prevent contamination, salmonella and other ones. And so I'm just thinking, like, if the business is growing and they're increasing the number of animals on their farms, then the risk is just going to keep growing. I mean, the more animals you keep at the same place, no matter how many antibiotics or growth hormones you give them to, there's still a high chance of an outbreak. And even though there are measures in place to keep everything contained, it's still gonna, and there are many instances when commercial pet foods were recalled and many dogs got poisoned and died. So I'm just thinking the situation in that regard will get worse.
It's so sad to think about it. I mean, here you have, and again, it's no different. We literally are practically in the same country. Of when you think about production, you think of commercial farming, you think of production for pet food. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter over a border or not. You have rendered product ingredients that are rendered until there's zero nutritional value whatsoever. Put it into the dog food or cat food. The meat is literally just nothing but slaughterhouse waste. It's not consumable by any human whatsoever. And let's throw that into dog food. It's ridiculous.
And you know what they do is like once all that nutritional value is gone, once the flavor is gone, they add this thing called digest. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's this proprietary little mix that they put into food, like essentially a bunch of boiled fat and waste materials that just happens to smell and taste good. And they essentially all this rendered stuff they put coating of that to digest, so that when dogs see and smell the food, they actually like, oh, that's not bad. I'll have it. And those are actually highly protected industry secrets. They don't want people to know that it's happening, or that or how they're making them, because first of all, the ingredients that are going there are not the greatest. Just horrible.
It's hard to believe, at this stage in time where we're supposed to be flying around in jet cars and everything's supposed to be so sci-fi. At least that's what we thought it was going to be when we were kids and we saw cartoons. But it's so weird that we're looking at nutrition, the most obvious conversation that we've been having about our own nutrition, and we've been having about our kids and their exercise habits and our exercise habits. All of these things, and yet it's nothing changed when it comes to dogs and cats. Now, yes, cats, I understand, they're more of a layback slumber type, but dogs, they need that. They need the right amount of the right carbohydrates. They need to be able to be exercised. They need to actually have some kind of substantial nutrition for good body, sound mind. And yet, what's out there isn't doing it. And that's where I'm interested to see how the plant-based, how it can come in, fill all the voids that any kind of meat protein would do, and how it's going to be possible to actually move forward. And you've done this in the last 4 years. You have been able to find the actual recipe, be able to put it all together, and develop. So, with that, none of the plants though that you use are rendered. They're all pure. So nothing has been melted down and used in multiple different ways. Correct?
Yeah. So a lot of nutritional science has gone into creating the formulas that we distribute in Canada, and you're talking about like the sci-fi age. We're talking about like flying cars and cryptocurrencies and things like that, and comparatively speaking, not progress has been done on the nutritional front, but I would somewhat agree that it's kind of lacking. Not nearly enough research has been done on the nutritional side for cats and dogs. A lot of the research that's been completed has been done by the large manufacturers of pet food, and not enough of research has been done about vegan pet food, which is why there's more researchers are necessary, more funding is necessary on that front. But having said that, we do know certain things. Like we know, for example, what requirements dogs and cats have. And if you were to break down their food into the building blocks, we know exactly of how much of the building block cats and dogs need different on different stages of their lives. So a puppy would require this, adult dog require that, senior dog would require it, and same for cats. We know their requirements, and the requirements have been done independently by the North American authorities in the U.S. as well as in Europe. So we know what cats and dogs need. And what's interesting is that those same requirements, they can be fulfilled by any kind of ingredients. So those can be plant-based ingredients or those can be meat-based ingredients. What it comes down to is to the nutritional composition of the food. So we know that proteins are composed of amino acids, and cats and dogs require certain amounts of those amino acids, right? And so if we are able to provide those amino acids in the required quantities, either from meat-based ingredients or from plant-based ingredients, then from the nutritional perspective, it doesn't make any difference for the cat or for the dog, right? The big difference that we have with the plant-based diet is once we supply everything, every single building block, is that it comes at a significantly lower environmental and ethical cost. So no other animals had to die, no CO2 emissions had to be released, whereas cats and dogs are getting every single bit of nutrition they require. Like you might have heard of, for example, taurine, right? Taurine is the amino acid that cats cannot generate themselves, and they need to have it from the meat-based source as well. That was substituted with an engineered taurine in the lab, and in its properties, it's every bit as good as the natural one, and it's added to our pet foods. And not only to plant-based diet, it also added to a meat-based diet because the natural taurine gets baked off during the production process. So when big pet food manufacturers make their own food, they process their food so much that the natural taurine gets baked off, and due to temperature and pressure, and they add the engineered taurine, which is the one that we use, in their food anyway. So even from that perspective, our foods are not different. So we're both meeting the nutritional requirements. We're just doing this at a much lower ethical and environmental cost.
Which is completely understandable and definitely most needed, because obviously we need to find alternatives to what's been going on. Now with plant-based being the way it is, and obviously having skeptics, because obviously in everything we do there is. Do you find that you get a lot of negative feedback from veterinarians or even other pet parents, or is it pretty much just normally all been very supportive?
I would say actually pet parents are overall as a population are more open to vegan options than veterinarians. And I think that's because of the old school education that many vets have received. I think the new generation of veterinarians are a lot more open to plant-based diets, and I guess they're looking at it with a fresh sort of mind. Yeah.
Now, I know we have a few veterinarians that do listen to our podcast and weigh in every time that something interesting comes up, or even in an emotional conversation, such as plant-based. What are some things that you could tell a veterinarian that would actually at least satisfy their concerns for the fact that plant-based is possible and is going to be nutritious for their patients to actually start to use on a daily basis?
You see, the veterinarians definitely have a lot of training in the field of animals, and I guess what I would say is that there is research that has been done on plant-based diets, peer-approved and published in journals and some open sources that's accessible. And I would encourage them to read what's been already done in terms of research for plant-based diets. So there was an article about huskies, race-fed huskies. There was a big study that looked at all studies about vegan pet foods and for cats and for dogs. And there is a very valuable and useful information that's accessible, and people can see like the results of feeding dogs and cats through feeding trials, through studies, which is more than just anecdotal. So I would encourage veterinarians to look into that research.
It's always interesting because it's one of those conversations, I guess you could go with, that multiple different levels of the mind kind of weigh in on. I consider myself as just a pet parent, so I don't have the mindset like you on being able to actually produce the product. I don't have the mindset to be a veterinarian. I've proven that by trying to figure out all of this stuff and the nutritional values and putting it all together into words. But it's always very interesting to try to open this line of communication, because as you've seen, it is definitely, kind of hard to gauge it. It's hard to start with, well, you can actually have a plant-based diet for your cats, where most people are like, that's crazy, you can't do that. It's a meat-based protein, they're carnivores, there's no way around it. So to have that conversation definitely takes a lot, and that's kind of what this has always been about, is trying to figure it out. Now, we were talking before we started about the whole distribution, and you were saying how that's its own little challenge. Let's go into that for a little bit to kind of gauge how that process has worked.
Okay. Distribution. Most people prefer to get their pet food from stores. So yes, there is this online channel. People can go Amazon or any other website and purchase online, but it's not the default sort of way of people's thinking. Most people prefer to get it in a supermarket, in a pet store, and that's sort of what most people would prefer. People save on shipping that way, and they don't have to pay extra or they don't have to wait. They can just go and get it, and their dog or cat will have their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, trying to sell vegan pet food to stores has proved nearly impossible. There's all this skepticism from people, and especially from people who work on the floor and the managers, and it's a very difficult proposition to offer this new food. For dogs, they're a little more open. For cats, it's like almost a no-go in most cases. It always comes down to, cats are carnivores, and that's when the discussion ends. And for example, myself as a distributor who reaches out to the stores, like I don't even have the time to explain all the things that that are possible with vegan pet food, like all the research that has been done, all the anecdotal stories, successful transitions, and how cats and dogs are thriving. And we don't even get to those conversations. The conversations stop short, and it's been very difficult to collaborate with stores. And plus, big issue is the price, right? So stores they want to make a good margin, and vegan pet food is more expensive due to a lack of economies of scale. All the big pet food manufacturers are enjoying large production facilities, economies of scale, and they and really cheap ingredients, right? So they can produce food at a much lower cost, even though they're using meat-based ingredients, which are supposed to be more expensive. But because of the economies of scale, they are able to produce it much cheaper. And plus, in most cases, the quality of ingredients is not so great, and therefore it's very cheap. So cheap ingredients, economies of scale, no stigma. So those big pet food manufacturers are able to get into stores no problem, and we sort of get the short end of this stick. We don't have the economies of scale. There's the stigma against vegan pet food, and the cost is more, and it's harder to negotiate the margins and the price of the product with the stores. So that's why it's been very difficult to distribute the food in stores across Canada. And I'm sure the same problem applies for the U.S. because it's business is business no matter where you go.
Yeah, I really honestly, that's why I've pretty much made the analogy that there really isn't a real disconnect, I would guess would be the best way of putting it, between the U.S. and Canada in this type of platform. It's the same thing. A lot of our issues, you guys face the same ones. So I would imagine that would be difficult. I would imagine the fact that a door being slammed because, let's be realistic, there is not going to be that open mind, and it is difficult. And that's where we were talking about it. You have omnivore and you have carnivore, and that would be very challenging. But there has to be that, again, option for the pet parent. That's their choice to make. I mean, if we're going to let them eat this inferior kibble that are made by big pet food companies and be okay with that, then we really should allow everybody to be involved with the simple fact that there are regulations and precautions in place. And that's kind of what is driving me nuts with a lot of this, is that, look, you have had no recalls, you've had no problems, you haven't had any cases of any fatalities. So
yeah.
there's obviously something that's working. Now, with that said, yes, it is definitely a different change, a different outlook. But, we need to keep exploring the science, I guess, is how it all looks out. Well, let's go into your product line, because you do have an extensive amount of different things, and I wanted to actually start off with the dogs, because the cats really interest me, and I thought I would bury that until more or less in the middle or towards the later part. So your first product is the sample pack for dogs, the Evolution Diet.
Yeah.
I'll let you explain all of these things, because it's definitely your product and you understand it the best.
Well, as a distributor, we carry multiple brands, so we get products. Actually, Evolution Diet is the U.S. product, so we import it from the U.S. and then distribute it in Canada. The Amy product is the Italian brand that we import from Italy, and we also have a line of supplements that people can use at home for making foods at home. It's called Veggie Pet. They've got Veggie Cat, Veggie Dog, Veggie Pup, Veggie Kid for kittens. And so we offer a whole wide array of products from different manufacturers. And the sample pack that you mentioned, Evolution Diet for Dogs, is essentially every single product from Evolution Diet that includes a pound of dry kibble, a can of wet food from Evolution Diet, some nutritional yeast, cranberries, and sweet potato treats. We also include an explanation for people how to transition, because in many people's minds, it's one thing to just get the product, but how do you actually take your dog from a meat eater, being a meat eater, to being a plant-based dog? So we have a suggestion sheet with steps of how to do it so that the transition is successful. And that sample pack, its purpose is to really see if a dog enjoys the flavor, and if the dog can transition nicely to a plant-based diet, and to try various different treats as well along the way. That's really the purpose of the sample pack.
Now, what's the difference ingredient-wise when you look at the Evolution to the Amy? Because obviously one's American, one's Italian, and I just wondered, is there a vast amount of difference in ingredients? Is there anything that's special?
Yeah, there's actually a vast amount of a difference in the product, because they follow slightly different regulations. So, for example, Evolution products, they comply with AAFCO regulations, which is the American standard for pet food, and AMI, they comply with FEDIAF, which is the European Commission for pet food and how pet food should be produced to satisfy the national requirements of cats and dogs. And those requirements are different, so those two standards are a little bit different. And so that also makes, for example, AAFCO, they say that there is a list of items, a list of nutrients that dogs and cats need to have, and therefore evolution adds them. So you'll see that the number of ingredients in evolution diet is longer. There are more items in the evolution product than in, for example, AMI products. Also, the base ingredients from which the products are made are also different. So, like AMI, they have the luxury of having access to non-GMO corn, which in the U.S. is almost impossible to get. And so, corn being actually a very palatable and nutritious product is used a lot in Italy, and the foods are amazing. Dogs and cats love it, and it's non-GMO. It's non-GMO corn, and it works really well. And it's considered to be hypoallergenic, so even dogs and cats with allergies can have it, and they will not have any outbreaks. Or if they had outbreaks before, they're going to be very limited or subside completely. So that's, yeah.
Well, most of the allergies, and it really is just doesn't matter where the dog or cat is from, is based on inferior product that's put into dog and cat food. So it's kind of one of those things. It's like anytime I see a dog come in and they ask, well, my dog has dandruff. Well, what are you feeding your dog? It's really a simple, always starts with the nutrition. That's where I always kind of gauge everything from. Now, the one thing that always resonates in my mind, and it's one thing that I'm definitely looking for some kind of clarification to, when it comes to a dry kibble, whether it's dog or cat food, there's always the fact that it is dry kibble. There's not as much moisture as in raw food or raw plant-based. So how do you deal with that kidney failure, UTIs? Do you guys see the same things in plant-based? And if so, how?
That's a really, really good concern. And I mean, in nature, cats and dogs, they don't eat dry foods. I mean, they're prey. For example, for cats, they prey on mice and birds and insects, and the moisture level of birds and mice is around 70, 75, 80%, right? Whereas dry kibble is only 10%. So where's the difference in water comes from, right? If you feed your cat or dog with exclusively dry kibble, it's not very healthy for them, especially for male cats. So male cats are especially, susceptible to kidney failures, to urinary stones, to blockages. It's due to their anatomy. And so, we too have dry kibbles in our store, but we always recommend to add water to dry kibble so that, cats and dogs don't get those same problems, on dry kibble. So, we always recommend to add water in 1-to-1 ratio. So, for example, if Guardian gives, for example, 1 cup of kibble, we recommend to match it with 1 cup of water, and then mix the two and let the kibble absorb the water. So, and just wait for half an hour, and let the kibble become soft and mushy. And with that addition of water, the hydration level jumps from 10%, as it was before, to 50%, or 55%, which is a lot closer to what they would eat in nature. And that helps to flush all kinds of crystals or blockages in the urinary system, and helps hydrate the animal much better, and the absorption rate of the nutrients spikes. So a lot more nutrients are actually absorbed that way, whereas versus, for example, feeding dry kibble. So we always recommend adding water to dry kibble because it's a much healthier way. And not only that, it also helps to save some money because Guardians don't have to give as much mushy kibble because it has expanded in size, and you can give essentially less kibble to satiate the dog when you feed it in moist form. So people can actually save some money on that. So there are so many benefits of feeding moist food versus just feeding dry that we always recommend it. It's better for the health and it's better for the wallet.
All right, that works on that. That's pretty well explained. Now, question on that is, and I'm going to go on just what I hear from different people in the U.S. So I don't know if you've actually heard it in Canada, but most of the people are looking for dry kibble because it's a quick option because they're always on the go. So do you ever hear well, I don't really have that half hour to let the water soak in there. Is there anything quicker? Do you ever hear that, or is that just something that I've heard happen around here?
Yes, that's definitely even half an hour. Waiting for half an hour is a problem. People do prefer to have everything on the go. And for these cases, we do offer moist food in cans. So if it's really rush situation and they just have to get something done, don't have time to wait, people can give the food from the can. It's not the most affordable method. It costs more money to feed wet food in cans, but most people actually select to have some kibble for the times when they're not in a rush, and when they are, they just give the canned food, and that way, it kind of meets all the objectives. It works out nicely.
Okay. Now let's go into cats, because obviously that's the big one right there. That's the one that draws everybody's attention. Everybody's ears are perking up right now as I say cats.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, do you have, again, you guys carry multiple different products with, again, a cat kibble as well. You have a moist.
Mm-hmm.
What are the ingredients that take the place of a meat protein to be able to actually supplement in? What is it that makes it unique?
Well, actually, for protein, all of our products have a 30 to 33% protein, which is in many cases more than meat-based counterparts have. So amount of protein we have is a lot of protein, and it comes from different sources. For example, it comes from oats, it comes from corn, from soybean, from sunflower seeds, pea protein, or whole peas, or rice protein. So these are all the different sources of protein. Plus, in combination with other amino acids that we add, like I mentioned before, taurine, for example, that's added separately. And taurine is an amino acid which is a building block of protein, which cats absolutely require to have. So we add it as well, and that makes the protein profile complete and 100% adequate for cats. So the protein that cats are getting from plant-based foods is exactly what they need as per the nutritional requirements.
Okay, makes sense. Now, again, we've already covered the fact of moisture and kibble, but there was one thing that I was just like, I'm completely lost on. What is vegan chicken cheese, or pure vegan cheese, or vegan aged cheddar? I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah, these are our flavorings. They're created. They're manufactured by Evolution Diet, and what they are is essentially nutritional yeast. So the nutritional yeast you get in store is like the flaky one, like in a bottle, and you just put it on top of your food. That's human grade. But what we have here, the aged cheddar, vegan aged cheddar, vegan chicken cheese, or pure vegan cheese. These are all different flavorings of nutritional yeast specifically for cats and dogs. So it's just a different strain of nutritional yeast. It's in a powder form. It's not in a flaky form. It's in a powder form, and they have been selected based on how potent they are from the perspective of animals. So cats and dogs, they'll love the smell. They'll like the flavor of those nutritional yeast. So if the cat is picky, for example, you would take maybe a third or half of the teaspoon of the powder of that nutritional yeast. You would put it on top of the food or mix it in, and they would have it a lot more eagerly because it's got this potent smell and it's got this flavor, cheesy flavor, which they like a lot. So that's what it is.
I like cheese, so I just thought, hey, this is kind of cool. That's usually me. I'm like, hey, vegan chicken cheese. Now, we were talking before we started recording about if you were going to actually make a vegan meal or plant-based for your dogs or cats at home and make it fresh. And we were going over that, and I was like, you know what, we should talk about that while we're recording because, again, I have no idea where to start. I do put a plant-based in my dog's bowls, but it's not, 100%. It's just like maybe 15% into that, and that's just to simulate the content of the stomach of whatever animal that, in quotations, they would have been hunting. So go over, if you don't mind, go over some of the kind of cooking your different plans.
So I guess there are two main options that we offer. There's the pre-cooked option and the cook-at-home option. The pre-cooked option would include all the kibbles, wet food, and it's for people who are on the go and they really need to just have something very quickly. Whereas, for example, the cook-at-home option offers a lot of flexibility with what kind of ingredients you put in. And like with the raw diets, it can be a little difficult to sort of wrap your mind around, okay, well, where do I start? Like, what ingredients do I need to put in what quantities to make sure that my dog or cat is getting everything they need and their nutritional requirements are met. And so we offer, like, different recipes with all of our supplements. Like, we always recommend to supplement the home-cooked diets because cats and dogs do have specific requirements, and if you were to feed them just the scraps from the table, there's a good chance that they're missing something, especially for cats. If you're feeding cats vegan diet at home, like most definitely need to supplement it with taurine, right? Taurine is one of those amino acids that's hardly found in plant-based matter, so you need to supplement it. And dogs have certain requirements as well, and our supplements, they have all of those nutrients. So, and the supplements, they come with the recipes, so it tells you exactly how much of each ingredient to take, how to put it together, how to cook it, how much of the supplement to add, and you would decide, like, oh, I'm going to make it for next 2 weeks, so I don't have to worry about it. Just select a Saturday or Sunday to prepare the meal, and then you're set for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and you have enough food for them. And the beauty about this method is you get to select what ingredients you put in. Like, if you know that your cat or dog likes this and this ingredient, you can put those ingredients and not others. And if you want your food to be 100% non-GMO, well, you get non-GMO ingredients. So it's really your choice to configure the food any way you like. And I would say this is also the most affordable way to go about vegan pet food, because supplements, they're relatively inexpensive, and the ingredients you can get from the supermarket, and they're local, and you can select the ingredients you like, adjust the cost based on what you select, and this becomes a very affordable meal overall. So I think it's a great method, and a lot of people don't know about it, and they have the concerns about what I put in, but the recipes that we have, they sort of describe everything in great detail, and so many people have switched to that method, and it works very well. So if you have a little bit of time to cook at home for your loved animal, this can be a really great approach.
All right. Now, is there anything that you really feel like should be said to anybody? And again, this doesn't pertain to anybody. It is, whether it's a dry kibble, protein feeder, raw feeder, somebody on the fence. What would you pretty much tell them to kind of say, hey, this is an absolute safe way of feeding. This is something that you really should look into, especially if you're vegan or if you have that feeling inside. What would you actually want to leave them with in a message?
Well, first, I would say two things. Number one, I would say that meat-based diets, they come at a cost, and a lot of that cost is hidden. All the suffering of the animals is something that's not written on the bag. It's not shown on the bag. And so it's kind of like the externality. the externality that just people don't see, but it's there. Like some animal had to die to feed your cat and dog, and so and it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to happen with all the nutritional science that went into developing of the vegan formulas, and with the knowledge we have about the nutrition of cats and dogs. It's absolutely unnecessary. Just like for humans who choose to be vegetarians and vegans, and choose not to harm other animals, dogs and cats don't have to harm other animals. And plus, with all the bad ingredients that go into the meat-based diets, like you're actually helping your pet not to get sick and avoid any sort of chance of recalls and poisonings, and your dog and cat will be a lot healthier on a plant-based diet and a lot safer. So that's one message. And the second message is just to explore. There's a lot of information out there on the internet. I just want to have people to have an open mind, and really look into this topic and find the information, like get to the bottom of it, and to just see for themselves, and look at the all the success stories, look at the latest research, and it's all out there. It's available, and just be open-minded about it. It really comes down to nutrients over ingredients. So if I were to sort of have a final message, I would say, it's really about the nutrients. It's not about the ingredients. If a cat or dog can get all of the nutrients, then they'll be fine. It doesn't have to be a specific set of ingredients. That's what I would say.
All right. Well, that it's always great to have these conversations, because again, they need to be had, and everybody has to have an open mind. So that's really what science and technology has always been about, is having an open mind and being able to learn. I mean, the craziest ideas out there became reality, and that's kind of it. I mean, somebody decided one day to make a car. That was crazy. How are you going to take a horse away from a buggy? Things do change. There are possibilities. Is there anything we did not cover that you think we really need to cover before we actually go?
No, that was a very comprehensive session. I think we covered a lot of different grounds. We talked about distribution, nutrition, about advice to veterinarians, the seed box and the origin story. We covered a lot of ground.
I tried. I want to make sure that this topic needs a voice. It needs to be able to be heard, and it needs to have it in the right way. And I want to make sure that all plant-based feeders are able to feel like they're getting represented the right way, and I want to make sure that knowledge and information is getting put out there in the world. So as long as I'm able to make those little components work, I'm happy. Well, Mikhail, I appreciate you for being on the podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and part of Canada with us. I'm always very happy to be able to have conversations with you guys up there, because, again, it is definitely a place I look to a lot and want to go and visit. Well, this is Chris Green, and have a fantastic week. Would you like to have the last word to sign off?
I just want to say a big thank you for having me and letting me express my thoughts and share with everyone. So, thanks very much for this opportunity.
All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, guys, it's my bedtime.